Good morning and welcome to Alley Pat's Place. Thank you for staying up. This is the Bewitching Hour, and we have some bewitching questions that we're going to ask the next governor of Georgia, who happens to be Andrew Young, the former mayor of Atlanta, Georgia. And Andrew, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
How do you feel?
I feel good. You know, I came to Georgia 36 years ago in June to pastor two little churches down in Thomasville and Beachton. And John Wesley Dobbs came down there and asked me to run a voter registration drive and help me.
Where was this?
This was in Thomasville, Georgia,
okay.
Thomas County, right down on the Florida line.
All right.
And there were about 300 Klansmen that came out to try to stop that drive. But we went on and we registered voters. I don't think I had any notion in those days, nor in the days that I went around Georgia running literacy classes at Dorchester Center and Liberty County and here in Atlanta and in all of the rural counties in Georgia. We trained people how to read and write in order to register to vote. And then with Selma, we got the right to vote. And after Martin's death, I came back to Atlanta trying to get somebody else to run for Congress. And nobody wanted to run, and I did and got elected. That went very well, and I would have loved to have stayed in Congress. In fact, if I had stayed 6 months more, I'd have been able to retire at 80% of a congressional salary. But I left and went to the UN. And because of that, there are two independent nations in Africa right now that I helped get their independence, the nation of Zimbabwe and the nation of Namibia. And the independence programs, the plans for their independence, really were drawn up around my dining room table with ambassadors from Europe and Africa and coming together. Then I left there and came back to Atlanta, and Maynard Jackson and Miss Susie Laborde got me cornered. And Maynard had put Miss Laborde up to saying to me that I had to run for mayor. And times were kind of hard in Atlanta in 1981. But I took a chance, and I think that Atlanta has just grown like I don't know what. When I became mayor, there wasn't any Midtown. There was nothing around Lenox Square. There was nothing down on the south side. Like the Lakewood Amphitheater, or like the new building going up out at Hartsfield, or like all those houses that people are building around Southwest. That we brought in about 500,000 new jobs into this area, and about 35% of everything the city spent under my administration was spent with minority contractors, over 1,200 minority contractors. We got scholarships for our high school kids. And 69% of the high school seniors went to college from the Atlanta public schools last year, and they got $20.9 million in scholarship money. That averages out about $12,000 per student for those who went to college. So I have had, I think, an incredible career, and I don't want to stop it. I could easily go into retirement, go out and make some money, but I've never needed any money. I've always had what I needed. And I think that as governor of Georgia, we could extend the kind of prosperity that we have had in Atlanta to the smaller cities around the state, to black and white alike. And I announced on February 5th, and I've been to 93 different communities outside the Atlanta area. And I've been well received in all of them by black and white alike. And it's been amazing to me how we have been able to get people to come together. Now, the press doesn't cover me when I'm in the black community. They cover me when I go to some white controversial situation where they think it might be embarrassing. But they didn't cover me at the Auburn Avenue Festival. They didn't cover me last night at Gainesville at the NAACP banquet, or down in Milledgeville last Sunday night, or in Savannah when I met with all of the AME clergy, or in Columbus when I met with all of the Baptist clergy. But we've got a good campaign going, and we have everything but a lot of money. And we need the support of the entire community, because I'm convinced we can move Georgia forward.
Do you attribute your mayorship to the fact that there were more jobs and more building done in Atlanta since you have become mayor, since you were mayor?
Oh, I very definitely do.
Why do you think you did a better job than Maynard Jackson?
Well, I don't think I did necessarily. I built on the foundation that he laid. But one of the things, see, Maynard became mayor when he was 32. I became mayor when I was 50. I had already been to Congress. I'd already been to the UN. So immediately, I went out here where people had money. And every time I took a trip, I brought back an airline, I brought back some banks, I brought back some factories.
Well, it is said that you spent more time out of the state than you did in. You were an absentee mayor.
Well, I counted up, and the 200, if you work 5 days a week, that's about 250 days a year. I was in my office 265 days a year. I traveled, yes, I traveled almost 100 days, but almost all of that was travel in the interest of Atlanta.
Would you do that as governor?
It might not be necessary to travel that much. Atlanta, we were just getting Atlanta off the ground, and nobody was out there working for Atlanta. Georgia has an office already in Brussels, and an office already in Tokyo. But the truth of it is, a governor should travel. And if a governor can bring back jobs as a result of traveling, then by and large, that's the way I see the role of a governor.
Do you think a governor can do better? You think you could do better as a governor than you did as mayor?
Well, I could because I know more. I've had 8 years of experience doing it, 8 very productive years. The other thing is, there's no place in the world I go where folk don't know who I am.
Oh,
Just like they know who you are here in Georgia,
yeah.
They know who I am. And I tell you, let me give you an illustration of why I had to travel. The Chamber of Commerce wanted to go to Paris, but they almost canceled the trip because Dallas went to Paris. Dallas took a whole bunch of Texas barbecue. They took their symphony. They took, their country bands to have a big Texas festival. Nobody showed up. They had 50 people show up, see? And the only reason our chamber didn't cancel was I had made some independent appointments. And when I got there, I saw the Prime Minister. I had lunch with the Mayor of Paris. We had the picture of the Atlanta delegation on the front page of the Paris newspapers. And when we had our meeting, 400 people showed up and more wanted to come, see? And so we opened doors for Delta. Delta's been flying every day to Paris ever since. When Delta flies to Paris, all of those folk, black and white, who work for Delta, do a little better. And when we bring 2 or 3 French banks back here that begin to invest a little here and a little there, it adds up. And I understood that the government didn't have any money. When Maynard was mayor, he could go to Washington and get money. But Reagan ended that. You couldn't go to Washington and get money anymore. So I had to go where the money was. And that's what I did. And everywhere I went, I brought some back.
Governor.
Yes, sir.
You were fired from the UN because of some quote-unquote anti-Semitic remark you made about Jews.
Oh, no, not at all.
Right.
No, it wasn't right. I was the president of the Security Council, and I met with the representative of the Palestine Liberation Organization, who was a professor at Columbia University. And that was well within my right and within my responsibility. But I went directly to the Israeli ambassador and reported it. And the State Department was a little upset about my meeting and about my reporting it. And I just said to them I wasn't going to change. And I thought that it was best for me to resign because I knew what I was doing was right. And I also wanted President Carter to be reelected. He tried to keep me from resigning. But I thought that I would be better off coming back here working for his reelection.
Is he working in your campaign?
No, he shouldn't. Ex-president shouldn't get involved in a primary. But a lot of his folk are. His Attorney General, Griffin Bell, is my campaign chairman, and many of his supporters who supported him very well all over the state are very active in my campaign.
Are you against Jews or anybody specifically?
No, you know, I grew up in a community where my father was a dentist and where most of the business people that I met with early were Jewish as a child. And I understood that Jews had a similar situation of suffering and prejudice. And I've always had very good sympathy and rapport both ways. And I went to Israel 25, 30 years, 1966 with Gene. I had a 100% voting record in support of Israel in the Congress. And I have not hesitated to speak out against anti-Semitism and people defiling other people's human rights anywhere. So I get along very well with everybody. One thing I learned, and one thing our church teaches, is tolerance and understanding and appreciation of people who are different. So whether it's Jews or Muslims or Christians or Protestants, Catholics, Pentecostals, Baptists, or atheists, it doesn't make any difference to me.
Why is John Lewis so against you?
Oh, John Lewis is not against me at all.
Well, he said he's not for you, as he's not.
No, John Lewis is not taking a stand in this campaign.
Did you take a stand in his campaign?
I did not.
You did not?
I did not take a stand in his campaign.
Okay.
I had two good friends in that campaign.
Okay.
And I didn't take a stand in the mayor's race. And the reason I didn't was that I think that people resent folk trying to name their successor. I think if Governor Joe Frank Harris endorsed anybody, it would probably hurt him more than it would help him. Not because I would appreciate his endorsement, but people get angry when you try to name your successor.
Isn't, how are you and Murphy?
Well, you know, my mama taught me to respect wisdom and power, and Speaker Murphy has both. And so I have always accorded him the utmost respect. We couldn't have done Underground without Speaker Murphy's support. We wouldn't have been able to get the Democratic Convention without his support. We wouldn't have the Olympics coming here without his support. We wouldn't be building a Dome Stadium, and it was a shame that when they opened the Dome Stadium, they didn't mention his name, because nobody is more responsible for that Dome Stadium than Tom Murphy.
I understand that he is for somebody else, isn't he?
Yeah, sure. But he has said to me that he was supporting his candidate before I was running, but he said that he would support the Democratic nominee. And I intend to be the Democratic nominee, and I feel as the Democratic nominee, I'll have his support.
What is your stand on pari-mutuel betting?
Well, I think that people ought to have a right to vote on pari-mutuel betting and on a lottery. And frankly, I think I like pari-mutuel betting a little more than a lottery, because pari-mutuel betting would bring a horse industry into Georgia. And it would do something for some of these areas where the land is cheap and where they can't find any use. Right now, they're selling it to garbage dumps. Georgia land shouldn't be used that way. It should be used to grow things, and breeding horses is a fine use of land. It doesn't destroy the land. It doesn't negatively affect the environment. And it brings good money into poor communities. But the people ought to vote that up or down. And if they voted up or down, I would want to make sure that that money would go to education. Because education is really our crying need in Georgia. You know, 39% of our high school our students drop out in Georgia. That means we're graduating only 61%. Well, 61 is an F where I come from. That means Georgia's education is flunking. And I want to make Georgia's education not only pass, but I want to make Georgia's education do well. And, you know, my wife is a teacher. My baby daughter is a teacher. My mother, my mother-in-law, my grandfather. And our church has always believed that, that education is of the utmost importance. In fact, the only way you can get out of poverty is to get an education.
In other words, you as a preacher could in clear conscience sign a bill for pari-mutuel betting or racing.
Oh, I can. And I can because I respect people's right in a democracy to choose the values that they adhere to, and whether those are my values or not. I would never advocate anybody playing a lottery. That's the worst. You make slot machines pay off more than the lottery does. And everybody knows that slot machines are rip-offs. But lottery is just an unfair tax on poor people who play it, hoping that that dream will come. But you know, my grandmama, good Christian lady that she was, used to put her little 15 cents on the numbers every day. So for her, that was a hobby.
Yes.
And that was her right to have that kind of recreation.
That's what she wanted.
That's right. But now when people start putting their grocery money down, then it's a sickness, and you got to find a way to help them cure it.
Yeah. You be quiet for a minute. Let me go back to the studio. We'll be back in a minute. We're talking to the next governor of Georgia, Andy Young. Thank you for being there, and stand with us for a minute or two. We're talking to the next governor of Georgia, the former mayor, Andy Young. Andy, I want to know what you think about this runoff suit that's being pursued by Tyrone Brooks.
Well, I don't like changing the rules in the middle of the stream, see?
So you're against it?
Well, yeah, because I wish we could go ahead and let me win this one with 51%, because if I got 51%, I got a better chance of winning in November. And then if they want to argue about it and change it after this election, that's fine with me. Drop it to 40%.
You are not in favor of firing all of the Superior Court judges as of the 1st of January?
No, I'm not, and I think if I'm elected, or when I'm elected in November, I will try to get the plaintiffs and the state together. Because if we appeal it and it goes on up to Washington, somebody that doesn't know anything about Georgia, either the black community or the white community, is going to make an arbitrary decision. I think we can make a better decision here amongst ourselves. And you see, we need more judges. We need more minority judges. The judicial system is one of the most precious things we have in this country, and it ought to be done fairly, and there need to be more black input.
What was that other question? Since you qualified to become governor, they have tried to change the rules in the legislature about how much money an individual could give you. What do you think of this?
Well, there again, I like the limits, but they shouldn't have changed the rules in the middle of the stream. They let the others raise all their money. I didn't raise money while I was mayor.
Yeah.
See, I tried to finish up underground and finish up the preparation for the Dome Stadium, make sure we had a good race for the Olympics, see, and finish City Hall and get I did my job, and I wanted to finish everything I had started that I could start while I was mayor. So I didn't take time to raise money for the governor's race. And then once I start raising money, then they want to change the rules.
So have you adhered to their rule?
I will once it's approved by the Justice Department. But until then,
it hasn't been.
It hasn't been approved yet. Anybody can give me as large amount of money as they can, and I will appreciate it.
I saw in the paper today where you've only raised just a bit over, a tad, shall I say, over $500,000.
Well, we've probably raised a lot more than that since. We've probably raised as much money as they have since January. But see, they came into January with $2 million apiece. I've raised maybe $1.5 million since January.
Where did it basically come from?
It's basically coming from Georgia, but it's coming from all over. It's coming from, say, I went to Chicago and rounded up all the companies that had Johnny Johnson, and a group pulled together all of those businesses in Chicago that have plants in Georgia, and they made contributions. I went to New York. I went to Washington. But my friends from all over America who have some interest in Georgia and who are from Georgia have been helping me, but most of my money comes from Georgia contributors.
When you become governor, what are you going to do about drugs, or what are you going to try to do about it?
Well, I'm going to try to see if we can't put the kind of coordination in our police programs. See, they didn't give the State Patrol much drug training at all. Only 4 hours of drug training for state troopers. We've got to have a State Patrol and a GBI, Atlanta Police Force, and a Ludowici Police Force that can work together. And we're going to have to coordinate the law enforcement of this state to drive the drug traffickers out. We're also going to have rehabilitation. And I would like to see more church-based rehabilitation. I would encourage the churches to establish treatment facilities and counseling facilities. And I think we've got to do massive education in our schools from a very young age.
Have you gone into the white communities and campaigned, and if so, how have you been accepted?
I have gone
South, all over.
I have gone everywhere, and I've been to 93 communities, and I've been as far south as Camden, Georgia, as far north as Chattooga County.
When you speak to white groups, how do they accept it?
Well, I got a standing ovation up there in North Georgia where J.B. Stoner carried the county when he ran for governor, because I was talking about jobs. I was talking about education. I was talking about a new day for Georgia where our children don't have to go away to get work, but where we bring the work to our children. And I was talking about a Georgia that could be a leader. And I said that folk didn't care what color Herschel Walker was. They just wanted him to make University of Georgia #1. Well, I'm about as close as they're going to get to Herschel Walker in politics.
Yeah.
And I can make Georgia #1 in rural development, just as we made Atlanta #1 in urban development.
You know, every governor says that. Every man who's aspiring.
You never had a governor, though, that's been a congressman, an ambassador, a mayor, and a human rights activist, and a preacher.
So you are saying that you are more equipped to do the job than any race.
There's nobody in the country as well qualified to be a governor as I am. And that includes George Bush.
You actually believe this?
No, George, well, there's nobody that's had the breadth of experience from rural areas to big cities all around. I mean, it's a matter of record. It's not opinion. There are only 2 other mayors who are now elected governor. There's no other ambassador serving as governor. There are only 1 or 2 former congressmen, only one that I know of serving as governor. I'm a congressman, a mayor, an ambassador, and a preacher, and a pretty damn good guy when you come right down to it. Won't you admit that?
Yeah. Well, listen, I must admit that I think the way you do about being a pretty damn good guy.
All right.
And what about the Olympics? Have you worked on this too?
I've been working on the Olympics, and I'm going to have to take a week off.
How do we stand?
Next week to go see about that. I think with my fingers and toes and everything crossed, the thing that's going to bring us the Olympics is the diversity of our city. That we have people from Africa, we have people from the Philippines, people from India, people from China, and whenever we bring these delegates in, we introduce them to people from their countries who are here doing well. And I think we're doing very well. I quote Billy Payne saying, if the Olympics were held today, I think we'd win it. Now, it won't be voted until September the 18th, but I hope your listeners will pray with me, because I don't know anything that could do more for this entire state than to have us designated as the host of the 1996 Olympic Games and have me as the governor to help develop the state and bring it to that point.
You laid the groundwork for the Super Bowl in 1994, didn't you?
Well, I had a little hand in getting the dome going, but really that's Tom Murphy's Super Bowl.
That's Tom Murphy's Super Bowl.
Tom Murphy's Super Bowl.
Andy, thank you.
Good.
Our time is about up. Any statement right quick, 30 seconds?
Thank you very much, and I'll come back on and be with you as governor, just as I have as mayor.
If you don't, I'll tell everybody what a big liar you are.
Okay.
Thank you for being with us tonight. I'm going to try to get, I'm going to ask him, I'm going to try to get Lester Maddox on next Sunday. And because I think a lot of Lester Maddox, and Lester Maddox has done a lot for Georgia. He's the only governor that has been governor of Georgia that went out broke, so he had to be honest. I'm going to ask him next Sunday.
And I'm going out mayor almost broke.
You going out mayor almost broke. Thank you. We'll see you next Sunday, and be with us and have a good week. Have a good Labor Day. What's that? Memorial Day tomorrow. Good night and sleep tight.